Read, Admiral.
We are assembled here today to pay final respects to our honored dead. This death takes place in the shadow of new life, the sunrise of a new world, a world that our beloved comrade gave his life to protect and nourish.
He did not feel this sacrifice a vain or empty one. Of my friend, I can only say this. Now, whom pods destroy.
Hello and welcome to Whom Pods Destroy, a Star Trek discussion podcast focusing on the original Star Trek series with Kirk and McCoy and Spock. But we do deviate a bit. But this time we've decided to do a podcast on one of the movies. It's now coming up to the 40th anniversary of Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Now, this film itself, for me, my confession is that I sort of left it to the side. It wasn't for me the big film like Star Trek 2 and 4 and 6. And I always had that thing where the odd numbers weren't the best films. But recently, I went back and watched it again. And so did my compatriots who are here to discuss Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. It's Graham Sibley.
Hello.
And Terry DeFellon.
Your podcast. Welcome.
And it's me, Derek Mantle, because I always forget myself in this. But anyway, guys, I sat down and rectified a mistake of pushing this film to the side and really thoroughly enjoyed watching Star Trek 3 this week.
You like it a lot more than you did before.
I did. I like it a lot more than I did before.
Yes.
And it is a great movie. For me, it just hits a lot of the old Star Trek TV series that we've been talking about for ages. And it's got some really good golden bits of character and stuff. But not letting me waffle on for ages, what do you feel about it, Terry?
Yeah, so I've enjoyed this film from the beginning, and for a while it was my favourite Star Trek film. I saw it when it came out, and so sort of like was a teenager, and I loved it so much that I thought it was better than Wrath of Khan at the time. I think obviously over time I've revised that, but I've still always had a great deal of affection for the film. I do feel the film does have its flaws, but I also feel that it's the kind of film, and getting it this time around. When I watched it on Thursday, I was concerned that I would look at it with a more objective eye and then sort of like start to see the joins and perhaps see, where the film sort of like falls down. But I was actually pleasantly surprised and found that I did enjoy it. I feel the plot's a bit thin, if I'm being completely honest with you. And not just the whole hokey premise, but also the getting from A to B, the plot is just a little bit sort of like, stretched. But I think it works, and I think it's got some deficiencies. But what really I always get past, and I remember this being a comment at the time when it came out, and I think it always is that it definitely had that feeling of being an episode of TOS. And we've said the same about Star Trek 5, to be fair. I think that there are clear differences between those two films. But really, Leonard Nimoy came along and he rocked that TV feel to it. But at the same time, I think that can also be a criticism of the movie.
Yeah, I would agree that. I would say that every time this film thinks it's going to present you with a B plot, it doesn't. It's just something that is just on the periphery of the A plot that goes all the way through it. And of course, the whole thing of the fact that Spock is being regenerated by this planet, I think a lot of people look at that and they think, yeah, hokey, completely hokey. I mean, even for sci-fi, that's hokey. But I think once you look beyond that and you see it for what it is, and the story and the way, especially how character-driven it is, and some of the great performances that are put into this by the ensemble cast, I think that then you get a really good episode. It's a serviceable film. I don't think it's gone up in my estimation. I don't watch this as much as the other ones. I mean, I must admit, when I watched it this time round, as the same as I've watched it recently as well. I say recently, probably the last time I saw it was probably about 5 years ago. But watching it in HD, and I'm surprised by it because it's so familiar to me watching it in VHS for all those years, and that's what the look and feel of this film is to me. And it was just nice to watch it in a nice clean print, and just an entertaining watch. And because it's so familiar for me, I can let the hokey story go in the background and then concentrate on the characters. And it's really, really good as far as that's concerned.
That's a really interesting point, because I was going to say a similar sort of thing, because I was watching this in HD with our new TV that we had for Christmas.
Oh, nice.
But in previous times watching Star Trek, it was usually on television and VHS, when we got VHS and stuff like that. And I didn't really go many times for the cinema experience, which I know that you guys have done a lot. And that's why you said you went to see Star Trek 3 when it came out so many times, because the experience there must have been brilliant. And watching this again on a big TV in HD, I really enjoyed it. It was a proper cinematic experience, even though it was in a living room, because our technology has gone on so much. So I could understand why you probably watch it so many times, and coming back to it, as you said, Graham, was a different experience. And this is what it's about, I suppose. This is why cinema still probably tops compared to TV. And the first time, if you watched this in the 80s, it must have just, been a major deal, because, I mean, at the time in the 80s, there were some very good movies, but, there was a lot of very substandard stuff out there. So for me, I really enjoyed it. That cinematographic experience at home was pretty good.
The film got an extra bit of budget, not much, but a bit of budget over Wrath of Khan. But because they were able to reuse a lot of stuff from the Wrath of Khan, they put an awful lot of money into the visual effects and the special effects, and gave ILM a bit of an upgrade. And I think that really shows in some of the special effects. There's a lovely Star Trek trope of the space stock beauty shots, which we still see now in modern Star Trek, and that's as it started off in motion picture. But Star Trek 3 is the proper, and they just reuse the old one in the motion picture one in Wrath of Khan. Star Trek 3 has a new space dock sequence, and of course it's got the new space dock, which is amazing. So some lovely world building there, and then the pulling up into the whether you've got the big restaurant and everyone's looking out through the window while this beaten up old Enterprise turns up. The mundanity of a ship pulling into park is ridiculous, really, if you think about it. And obviously as Star Trek fans, and I think obviously we're a lot of the audience who, even if they're not necessarily Star Trek fans, the image of the Enterprise is so iconic that it has some emotional resonance anyway, that scene really, really works. But also beautiful score accompanying it, but also those visuals are really, really good. I mean, with the movie's now been obviously upscaled quite a lot, and you watch it on a big screen on an HD TV or a 4K TV or a HD, and you can just about start to see some of the joins. Yeah. But for a film of 40 years old, that's still actually pretty impressive. But I think you just have to sort of also admire the scope of the imagination and the vision that goes behind it. I think that's also part of it. Being able to construct these things. They made it out of a transparent spacewalk, out of a transparent perspex, didn't they? And painted it, and then they lit it, and then they just scratched out the light so that the light's coming through. Just the imagination and the thought goes through. Similarly with the map paintings and stuff like that. And the fact that most of this movie is shot on a soundstage. And we were talking a little while ago, we've talked on a number of occasions specifically about What Our Little Girl's Made Of and The Squire of Gothos, where the off-Enterprise sets are basically on a soundstage, and that the director seems to almost embrace that and almost show the movie, show the episode as though we were watching an extended play. And that has that feeling as well with this movie. And I think I think that the visuals really pop in this film, and I think that's one of the reasons why it holds up so well. That final sequence, the very final scene, as Spock is reunited with the crew, that the simplicity of the matte painting behind it, but the colours behind it, just that flat horizon and the colours going there, clearly a matte painting. And when you're watching it now, clearly a matte painting, but beautiful, a beautiful backdrop. And that's that sort of like shot of Kirk and Spock facing each other with that in the background. Absolutely gorgeous and a very emotionally resonant and very powerful scene. Really works really well. And wouldn't be possible now because they just don't do that stuff anymore. They would have shot that film completely differently. So I think that's why I say, in many ways, the film's shortcomings are also its strengths, because again, it's giving us a glimpse of kind of storytelling that they just don't do anymore, using filming techniques that they just wouldn't do anymore. And I think that's why the film still continues to have value. And of course, it's amazingly acted. I mean, as you guys are saying, the character pieces in this film are superb.
And also, this is the second part in a new trilogy, because when we watched the first part of this, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, for me, that seemed to be just a contained piece. And I don't know if they had planned it out, the way that they did, because that the bit with McCoy and Spock in Star Trek II, the remember bit. For me,
they dropped that in at the last.
They dropped that.
Yeah,
right
they knew
this
film. They knew Wrath of Khan was good, and I think that they thought, well, let's drop that in case we need a sequel.
So first they started off with a sequel, and then they created because obviously a trilogy, because obviously this did fairly well, and the cinema did very well, I presume, to continue on a trilogy. They are part of a piece, aren't they? This is a linchpin to what Star Trek is. The characters and the interaction between them. I mean, as much as we bemoan the cheesiness sometimes of Shatner and some of the other characters, here in this film he goes through a range.
He's brilliant in this.
Yeah,
Shatner is brilliant in this film. I mean, he does to do an awful lot of the heavy lifting in the film. He's the principal character. He always is, to be fair. But in particular, he's got no Spock to work off of in this film, and he has to do a heck of a lot of heavy lifting to carry the narrative through. And, he's acting, during this, I mean, the inner turmoil he's got, there's an awful lot he's doing. That scene when he's trying to persuade Admiral Morrow to give him the Enterprise, and he's getting his ear chewed off by Morrow. He's getting bollocked by Morrow, basically, for saying, what are you playing at, mate? And he's just sitting there. And then Nimoy does this bit quite well. He just slowly zooms into Kirk's face while Kirk is sitting there. And you can see the cogs working. A lot of this is your own personal familiarity with the character. But I think that anybody watching this fresh would infer strongly that there's a guy here who's no longer listening to this, and he's now thinking ahead, thinking, right, what happens next? Yeah. He's already visualizing stealing the Enterprise and what he needs to get that done. And that's a really nice character point. But you're right. I think the other appeal of it is that kind of ensemble feeling, which we discussed. Just you mentioned this, so you can elaborate on it a bit more afterwards. But in what it affects for Next Gen and how it's a bit of a legacy in storytelling for Next Gen. But of course, it's also something that goes all the way back to the early years, the early episodes of season 1 of TOS, when the show was looking to be more like an ensemble show. And it's nice that we got that, and it's nice that the supporting characters got a little bit more time in this, and indeed in the subsequent film as well.
Yeah, it's not just time; it's good lines as well. Don't call me shorty.
Don't call me tiny.
Yeah. But it's that sort of thing that helps it become a bigger part of the whole of the sequence of films and of the whole of Star Trek altogether. But you're right, Shatner's interaction with the other members of the cast is great in this, and he has a couple of very, very important scenes with when it's just one-on-one with someone else, like the scene with McCoy when he's in Spock's quarters. That's very powerful, and of course the scene with Sarek where he does the mind meld, which is just great. And this great Trek, absolutely great Trek. I mean, you'd be hard pushed to find better scenes, I don't think, in those TOS movies.
Absolutely, and very evocative of TOS as well.
Yeah.
And clearly understanding and hearkening back to the camera angles and the static camera. I mean, I've heard people criticise Nimoy's direction for being too static and too TV.
Yeah.
And I can understand that criticism, because it is like watching a high budget episode of a TV show. And that isn't going to be for everyone. There will be people who will say, you're making a movie, make a movie.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in subsequent Star Trek. For Insurrection, I think, for example, is a very, very serviceable, enjoyable 2-part episode of Next Gen, but it's not a movie. But at the same time, Star Trek fans, then when they're presented with a movie like Generations, which really is a movie,
Or motion picture.
motion picture, they go, "Oh, what are you doing?" It's like, no. So it's a fine line to cross. But I think from a technical point of view, I think Nimoy's lack of experience, I think sometimes there's not a lot of dynamism sometimes in the tracking, in the positioning of the camera. I would still say these are minor criticisms, however, to what is generally speaking a thoroughly enjoyable film with some amazing characters and a tremendous legacy.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about the resurrection plot line. We're talking about other things as well. I mean, like, that whole, you were saying beforehand, Graham, that whole ensemble thing also is a jumping off point for the next generation as well.
Yeah, certainly. It's something you see more when you've got a TV show that lasts for 7 seasons and has a big cast. You're going to need that. You're going to need to utilise the cast. And in Next Gen, that's what becomes the focus of it, really. I mean, once you get to season 3, I think I was reading somewhere where it was, I think the people inside Star Trek consider the bonding to be the turning point.
All right.
Not a celebrated episode.
No, totally.
But it's seen as where Next Gen departs from Roddenberry's Star Trek, where it goes, right, okay, this is what Next Gen's going to be about. This isn't just about red shirts on the planet getting shot. No. This time, if someone gets shot, it has meaning. Yeah. There's a whole backstory behind it, and it's that sort of thing where you need all the ensemble cast
networks as to which characters work and which characters don't. But also in their defence, probably the fact that the chemistry between Nimoy, DeForest Kelley and Shatner was very, very strong, and that perhaps that writers and directors were drawn more to that as the series progressed, if you wanted to be kinder. But that Star Trek 3 kind of reflects that balance. But it's also reflective of Nimoy as well, of course, because when they did the animated series, they wanted to just get voiceover artists in to do the supporting characters, and Nimoy said, "I'm not doing it unless the other guys are involved as well." And so he's clearly, I would suggest, that has in mind that idea that it's an ensemble. So it does that while at the same time being a very, very Kirk-focused episode. Yeah, because of the narrative of the story, and it's about him and it's about his friendship. Ultimately, it's about him and his friendship with Spock, and to a degree also, and his relationship with David as well, which of course, that's probably an area of the movie that I don't think is well served. Alas, I don't think that Robin Curtis and Merritt Buttrick had great chemistry in those scenes. I don't think Robin Curtis played Savick very well, unfortunately. I don't think it was difficult for her to do. I mean, not easy after to follow Kirstie Alley, who defined the role. I think that was a tricky part. But also that they never developed the connection, the relationship between Kirk and David. There's a lot of backstory in the original sort of like script, and then the novelization for which it's based upon, which just never got done. Yeah. And we don't see David until he's off the planet. It would have been probably nice to have had some kind of scene earlier in the movie, perhaps with Kirk and David, just for the audience's benefit, just to re-establish that emotional
This is the missing
connection.
B plot, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is that's the problem there. And of course, they lose Kirstie Alley, so they bring Robin Curtis in, and it doesn't really work in there because Savick has none of the fire that she has in Wrath of Khan. This is a completely different person here. I mean, it's difficult getting in a new actor, recasting it. So let's get over that. But then we don't get enough of the time when they're on the planet. And some of the stuff that they do devote time to on the planet is just, like the Pon farr sequence is just fan service.
I think that's
it's just fan service. So,
Yeah.
oh, well, you know, if he went through rapid aging, he goes to Punk.
Yeah, you're right.
Get out of town. Look, just
That's a box ticker. That
Yeah.
one.
Yeah,
that
and
was
the source is a
disappointing.
bit, it's a bit weird and a bit, you didn't
Yeah.
really need it.
Yeah, it's a bit creepy.
Yeah.
frankly.
exactly. And I don't think it would be any less.
No.
Shit's going on.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that because that's the most tenuous and the weakest part of this of the project.
Yeah.
is getting it so that Spock can return at the age that he's at, and it's hokey enough transferring marbles into someone else's brain.
Yeah.
But the idea that then he's kind of like coincidentally at the same age when he's back there, there's no way they're not going to be aware that these are going to be a stretch for the audience. And so how do you do that? And what you do that is that you try and bury it in this like B plot, this minor B plot, and just hope that there's enough, literally you bury it with like an exploding planet around you in the hope that the audience is distracted by some tremendous character performances by William Shatner.
Yeah.
And of course, and we haven't mentioned him yet, by Christopher Lloyd.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, Christopher Lloyd. Just an utter triumph from him, really, isn't it?
Well, it is brilliant putting him in that role, but also, as you said, this is a well-building episode, a film. I shouldn't say episode, but obviously
Easy mistake to make.
Yeah, and all of the stuff that that comes from here with Christopher Lloyd and the crew of this, Klingon Bird of Prey goes straight into the TV series.
Yeah, it's the next gen. Yeah, the whole idea of Klingons is taken from this film.
This film, yeah.
From this film.
And really from one actor.
Yeah.
I mean, Christopher Lloyd, Krug is the original Klingon.
Yeah.
As we understand Klingons now, Krug is the first.
Yeah. Him and Torg.
Him and Torg. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, everything else has been a build up to that. So, yes, some fantastic performances and Klingon performances like John Colicos as Kor, and then Michael Ansara as Kang, and then and Koloth as well, William Campbell, but quite different types of character. Not a consistent portrayal of Klingons, and then the visual portrayal is kind of solidified in motion picture in that small sequence before at the beginning of motion picture, and then it's all brought together and put into Krug, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant casting for one thing, but it's also excellent characterization, and it all goes from there, and that possibly is the biggest significance of this movie, then its strongest legacy.
And Klingon humour.
In
Feed My Dog.
Yeah, and also, Target, engines only. But because Christopher Lloyd is a comic actor, it works so well. But he is amazing because it's one of those Henry Fonda in Once Upon a Time in the West moments. It's like, it's that Jim from Taxi. It's just a guy who you associate with comedy, playing a bad guy, and just clearly loving it. I mean, clearly loving the role.
Generally known for playing people on the more colourful side of mental stability, isn't he?
Yeah.
So he's
nutters, you mean?
Yes, absolutely. And so he's great for it. And the fact that he comes out and he knows the Federation for what it is as well, and doesn't mind telling.
No, he's not wrong though, is he? Really? I mean, it's really. I mean, but the dialogue that he gets, is really absolutely spot on. I mean, the script, the dialogue, the script writing in this film is very, very, very good.
It's that mid-80s Cold War
totally
really, really well as well.
Yeah.
So it is.
But you're right, Derek. The humour that Krug gets in there helps as well, and then that kind of madness, the fact that he's the that kind of abandon that he has. And there's the vulnerability there, the hubris that he has, but then there's the sacrifice when we were first introduced to him because of obviously Valkyrie. He has to kill his lover in order to do this, and it's a really deep and rich character in actually what is only a few minutes of film. He gives so much, and I think subsequent writers of Klingon Star Trek have so much to be grateful for. Harve Bennett, who wrote the character, and Christopher Lloyd, who acted it as well. It's just fantastic.
Well, that's the thing that makes this film shine as well. I mean, it's to do with the writing. And it's all, the interaction between the characters, even the B characters, they shouldn't be B characters.
B characters.
But the humour as well that comes through. You've got enough space there for the humour to flow through there with the interaction of, just little jibes all the way through it, even like Scotty.
Punctuation, isn't it?
Shaft.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. And that makes it a brilliant, chase scene. I love that chase scene.
What, they're stealing the Enterprise?
Stealing the Enterprise.
They're very slowly getting away.
Slow. That's it. They are. It's really, really slow, but it's actually, it grips you.
Yeah.
It's, and you think, God, it's all of that stuff. It has that tension. You've been introduced to a brand new sparkling sort of like starship, which is going to have to chase after it.
Yeah.
Originally, I remember reading this in the comic form before I actually saw the film. As you're reading, through something like this, you expect them that they're probably going to steal the Excelsior, which doesn't happen, which is great. But that's that sequence there, and the really hokey bit where the engine, and you hear it choking.
Yeah. That is probably quite silly, but again, it does work because of that. But it is very funny but it helps to sort of like say, well, look, these are massive ships. They take a lot of effort and a lot of power to get them. Once they get going, they're super, super fast, but they're not designed really to be living in space docks. It takes ages to get them out there. But I love it. 30 seconds to space doors is just something I often say at random. But I love that scene. Again, I love the humor of it, and I think, and it's just about right. And it just, because everything has to happen so slowly, we get more opportunities for character development, more opportunities for dialogue. We even get an opportunity to have a bit of a pantomime villain in Captain Styles, who's terrific. James B. Seeking, brilliant actor, great character actor in television, perfectly cast, come in there. All you have to do is be a bit of a twat for a couple of minutes and then you're away. And he nails that. Yeah. And really makes that whole scene work.
Another thing that you'll see throughout all the subsequent series as well, from character actors coming in and not just being a dick, but someone who is actually a bit more than that.
Yeah,
just a bit more dimension to that.
Yeah, just offering that little bit more.
But all these comic notes are expanded upon to make the next film, aren't they?
Yes.
And all the interaction, which is, it says, right, this is what works. This is what's really good. And all these characters who know each other so well, then you can get away with all this stuff. You can do this. And that's what makes Star Trek 4 work. And all the groundwork for that film is done in this one.
Yeah.
Stepping stone.
It's not just a stepping stone, but it is. It allows them to go in that direction.
You admire the craft behind that as well, because they wouldn't have known what kind of film that they were going to make as the sequel.
No.
They must have probably been confident that they would be doing another one after this.
Yeah.
Because they must have thought, well, we have now revived this franchise, so we're going to do more of this. And there probably was even at that early stage, there was talk about the new series as well, the TV show. So they must have known, but they wouldn't have had any idea what kind of movie.
No.
So they lay out all this groundwork and then and create this ecosystem to go, well, there's enough here now. We have a sandbox for which we can now play, and then we can then pick it apart and then make another movie, whatever that is. Yeah. And as you think more about these things, the more you develop a real appreciation for the craft of script writing, and world building and storytelling, and it's really good. Any disappointments in this film? I'm disappointed about Uhura's role in this film. I think she does play a role and a key role, but it is disappointing that she gets sidelined for a lot of this film.
That's very true. Because she's a great actress, and she should have shined in this really. But there's a little bit there. I mean, we've mentioned before off the podcast that there should have been a scene that was in the novelization that was part of this to expand it upon. But the plot itself actually has got lots of big holes in it anyway, hasn't it? Because it is an A to B story. I mean, it starts off when when you have Surik, he said that you've got to get Spock's Carter to Vulcan. The version that I was watching on TV, it doesn't mention anything about them making a detour to the Genesis planet. So
Well, they've got to get the body, haven't they?
Yeah, well,
Yes,
they didn't mention that. Though.
I must confess, this is an ambiguous for me.
Yeah.
He does say, "Why did you leave him on Genesis?" You know, but then at the same time, the inference is that actually all you need to do is get his capture back, and which is fine. So you just buy a ticket to Vulcan and for McCoy, and away you go. But I don't feel as though the necessity of having Spock's body is really, for me, that just doesn't work. And that whole process that they go through, you think, well, why are you don't need to be doing this, but they're doing it, but they are doing it because so I don't think that's sold very well in the script. I think it's one of the areas where I think it gets really thin and you have to indulge the film. You have to go along with it.
It's made up for the ensemble, but going back to sort of like Uhura, you don't see enough of her. The only people who do stand out is, of the secondary cast is obviously Scotty and Sulu. And unfortunately, Lord Fauntleroy, Walter Koenig is... as Chekhov with a really stupid suit.
Oh, come on. It's a magnificent... When you say stupid, what you mean is magnificent. It's glorious. I mean,
I'm now tempted to actually buy that for you for your birthday and actually make sure you wear it.
I wouldn't be able to pull it off, though. But I think, as we were saying beforehand, the trouble with that outfit is Walter Koenig, I think, is clearly conscious of the fact that he's wearing it, and I don't think he's flaunting it at all, unfortunately, which is a shame because it's a magnificent piece of work. The costumes are interesting, obviously, because all the uniforms haven't changed. So they put them all in civvies, most of them in civvies, and it's all a bit. There's some interesting choices going on there, isn't there?
Well, it's also a bit Star Trek, Star Wars, I was going to say, because you've got a slightly cantina scene as well.
Indeed.
Where you're introduced to
with that alien with the ears.
A proto-Ferengi.
And Tribbles.
Yeah, but I see that as a proto-Ferengi, really, because the idea that it's that sort of like dubious sort of wheeler-dealer character who, speaks, you're human, sort of stuff, is very sort of...
Yeah, that kind of backward sort of like speak, you're a planet, welcome, and stuff like that. And the reference to Morrissey as well, How soon is now? Oh. How much is where?
Oh my lord!
But yeah, so that's a little bit cringy, I guess. But it's an interesting decision as well to sort of like let's show a bit of Earth in the 23rd century. Let's sort of let's go to a bar. But you're right, it drifts into Star Wars.
Yeah, only for a bit though. Yeah, and then
you got the Federation security guy who's spying on McCoy, which is all a little bit dystopian.
Big Brother, yeah,
Big Brother, but
deep state.
That's the Federation for you. It is, after all, a massive state.
Yeah, that's the 80s for you.
And that's the 80s for you. Yeah.
Well, we've already had one sacrifice in the second movie, which was the main sacrifice. Spock dying. And then you see, I mean, the thing is about the way David dies in this. It's sudden.
Yeah,
it really is. You don't kind of expect them to follow it through because they haven't followed through Spock's lasting death anyway at this time, and you feel.
But there's no ambiguity about David's death.
No, he's
murdered, brutally murdered, and then his body is left to disappear basically in the ashes of Genesis. And it's very brutal. But I don't think it's jarring. And I think that whole sequence, again, there's great chemistry between, Krug and Kirk in that exchange after the battle. And Krug's fantastic. Again, absolutely brilliant. And I love that line, I give 2 minutes for you and your gallant crew, which is effectively... he's surrendering at that point. I mean, because of course he's like, no, I'm going to blow you up because it's like because like you're Kirk and you're dangerous, and he's a victim of his own hubris. But Kirk's obviously that whole David's death and Kirk's reaction more than make up for any sort of like deficiencies earlier on in the plot where we don't necessarily get that. There's no question that how hard this hits Kirk, and it's well acted. And I think it's appropriate. I think it works really well. And then, of course, minutes later, he then has to make another sacrifice. which is obviously not as big a sacrifice as your son being murdered, but certainly the destruction of the Enterprise. I think that's the big sort of twist in this movie, is the Enterprise's destruction. And the fact that it's Kirk who destroys the Enterprise. And I think, it's a brilliant special effects sequence, but also it is emotionally very, very powerful and done really, really well.
And, they haven't been able to top that, have they, in all the times the Enterprise has been destroyed?
It is the best Enterprise destruction sequence, no question about it.
Yeah, well, that's because it's a trap as well, which is great.
So it's clever, yeah.
And it's done so well when you hold the communicator.
You've got to think speaking, and and the old girl goes out fighting, girl goes out, which is kind of, poignant. I think that's work.
Well, that's shot at the end where you see the shooting star.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
Yeah.
That just... the silhouettes of everyone just standing there. And then
and that's a beautiful scene. And then then they don't know what have I done, and turn death into a fighting chance to live, which is one of the signature lines from the movie. I think it's definitely up there with "Don't call me Tony" as the signature dialogue.
But of course, that also leads to crew coming down to the planet and giving us what we didn't have in Star Trek 2.
That's a confrontation between the two. Yeah. And a terrific fire. No, it's a brilliant fire. No,
it is.
Listeners, you're wrong if you think that that's a terrible fire. It's a brilliant fire.
I thought it was incredibly hokey when I was a teenager.
Yeah,
but now when I'm at an age where I'm older than William Shatner was in this movie, I can think,
that's how you would do it.
That's how I'd do it.
That backflip, you would definitely do that.
I think the upscaling is not kind to Christopher Lloyd's stunt double. To be fair,
no, that Tash is really.
It's really dodgy, but it is a really good, well choreographed fight scene. Again, it stretches credibility because of Shatner's age, but because Shatner's just so game for that stuff, and he's just such a physical guy that it isn't actually that bad. And it is, and the decision to not put any music over the top of it as well, and just have the whole massive destruction. But the exchange just before that fight. That whole, this planet's destroying itself, that's exhilarating. If we don't help each other, we'll die here. And so you're perfect. And that's the way it shall be. It's like, it couldn't be more 2024, could it really? So that whole thing, I think that works really, and it's a really nice climax to the action adventure section of the scene, and then you've got that kind of postscript, haven't you, with the
and you have that's it, the confrontation between the two sort of characters there, sort of fighting, and that nice bit where Kirk is going to, after...
when Krug is like about to tries to, he says, "Give me your hand," doesn't he? And then
and he kicks his head in.
And he kicks his head in, realises that this guy's done, and says, "You know what? And that's it. Yeah. That's all good. I just do think that it's just the scope of the movie, the imagination behind the film. I think those final sequences in Genesis where it's all falling apart, and then the kind of symbolism of sort of like the hubris of people to feel that they can play God, by creating something, and then it obviously going wrong, and that slight subplot where David has used proto-matter as cheated in order to, the comparisons with his father and stuff, all work really quite nicely, and probably tying quite nicely. And if you're a Christian person, then you can probably appreciate the symbolism of the resurrection and stuff like that, and all of that that's going on there. It's not very Star Trek, but it's quite, it's still nevertheless, I think, something for everyone to enjoy in this film.
Well, Star Trek does like a bit of hokey mysticism, though, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
So it plays into that, doesn't it? And
absolutely.
They certainly enjoy that, and the scenes on Vulcan play that out.
Yeah,
the completely illogical hokey mysticism that they have on.
I don't get that at all. But I enjoy the sequence and I referenced it slightly earlier, but the Vulcan set, the matte painting around there, absolutely beautiful. Gorgeous, and they reused that set for Vulcan through the subsequent TV shows. Whenever they returned to Vulcan, that would be the establishing shot that they would use if you're talking about legacy. But all of that, James Horner's sweeping score, and I think they handled that, what is a tricky scene, as well as they possibly could. Sort of like as they were getting reunifying, bringing Spock, resurrecting Spock was always going to be a tricky scene to master.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, you're right. The mysticism and the sort of Vulcans with the Smurf hats and the, and the guy with the gong, virgin,
and the virgins, the virgins, the guy with the gong. I mean, it sounds like a fun party. To be fair, I'd love to go to a party like that. But
would you really? No, your age.
No, I wouldn't. No, of course
what with the 87-year-old centre stage?
Yeah, well, I think that's probably about right, actually, isn't it? Yeah. No, it's an interesting setup that they've got going on there, and I don't know whether or not it's real. But again, it harkens back to a mock time, I think.
Yes, it does.
And it just expands upon a mock time, doesn't it?
But and also the motion picture as well, because obviously the motion picture, I think that did a better job of Vulcan, actually. This kind of seemed like, as I said, like loads of Smurfs with silly hats on, and it seemed to be just too over the top for what it was, and Vulcan's supposed to be the place of logic and science, and you got the wellness community, I suppose.
We're back to wellness,
well, maybe that's it. Maybe the rest of Vulcan's utterly normal. It's only this bit that they say, where did the Earth guys go this place, this is what they're used to, I think.
God, you always hang out with those Spock and Sarek and those guys, and
those hippies,
they're all a part of this really hokey cult, and nobody is no one's into it, and now there's some weird ass story about some guy coming back to life. I mean, like, that is not logical.
No
totally illogical. No one ever goes to see those guys.
So all round, I enjoyed it. Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it. Oh, yes, I did.
I'm happy to say that I enjoyed it, and it was a great idea of yours for us to do this, actually.
Yes,
because we were all going to do Aaron DeMurty, which we would have enjoyed. But this was really good, because we've done a couple of stinkers recently, and this one was solid. But I was a little bit worried that maybe I'd see the joins too much in this, and I'm happy that you both enjoyed it too, actually, because there is always that fear that you think, worry that you think, are you allowing your own personal memories and emotions to cloud your judgment? But no, I think it holds up very well. I don't think it's an outstanding film, and there are certainly better Star Trek films, but maybe not many much better than Star Trek 3.
No. I think what you were alluding to earlier when you were saying about the story arc of these films, they wouldn't have gone in to Wrath of Khan saying, right, this is the first part of a trilogy. No. The direction of the trilogy does not really point you into what's going to happen in the next film, but it works. Situation. It works. It does. It works so well as part of a
they
trilogy.
Set it up for a movie, and then they've got a big enough sandbox. They've got enough situations to work with to construct an even better film.
Yeah, and because it's that bridge between 2 and 4, two of the best films in the whole of the franchise.
Definitely.
Then it sits well there. It doesn't compare to the other two. Those two are incredible films. They're really, really good. But it's so well attached to those two that it stands above
5.
Certainly 5, and 6 as well.
I think it's better than 6 too.
Yeah.
I think that there might be I think the popular view is 6 is one of the stronger ones. I think we did 6 in this very room, and I think our collective decision was it wasn't as good as we thought it was.
No.
I think that Search for Spock is probably better than we maybe thought it was.
Yeah.
And that's really, really pleasing. I certainly think it's the weakest of the trilogy, but it's one of the strongest of the whole group of movies, including the next gen films. I think that the next gen films really do struggle, I think, to meet the emotional tone and strength of the TOS films in general. Personally, I think the best. Anyway, that's another discussion for another podcast for different people to have that conversation. But I think that the TOS movies are better than the TNG movies. Put it that way. And I think the best TNG movie is still not as good as this 2, 3, 4 trilogy of either one of those. That's my view. Well, and I am a big fan of Generations, and still I would argue that film is not as strong.
Well, this has got heart.
Yes.
You know, that's the thing. I think the three.
I think that's a
those
lovely
three,
way of putting it.
yeah.
It's got heart. It's got
It's got-
Catra. It's
got-
Yeah, it's got
you know.
heart, it's got Catra. Yeah, it's true. It has got all of those things. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think it's time to draw a close there because we are going to head to the football ground now.
Yes.
Yes, we are. And so, dear listener, thank you very much for joining us on our little discussion about Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. We will be back, again, going back to the original series, and we're going to do Errand of Mercy.
Yeah.
So from me, Derek Mantle, goodbye. From Graham.
Goodbye.
And from Terry,
Goodbye.
goodbye.